Hello, welcome to our fourth and final video on the topic of philosophical arguments about abortion. And in our first video, we defined abortion. We defined abortion as the intentional killing of a fetus to end a pregnancy. In the second video, we reviewed some very common question-begging arguments on the topic. Question-begging arguments are circular reasoning. They assume the conclusion that they're trying to argue for, and question-begging arguments are always bad. In our third video, we reviewed some common everyday arguments that you might hear on the topic, and now we're finally getting to some distinctly philosophical arguments. So and these are arguments that philosophers focus on. So here we have arguments that abortion is wrong because fetuses have the right to life, and they have the right to life because they are human beings, they're persons, they have valuable futures, and/or they have a rational nature or essence. So those are some premises given in favor of thinking abortion is wrong, and we will look at these in greater detail. On the other side, we have some arguments that abortion is not wrong because, well, first, the arguments that it's wrong are not very good arguments. So this argument depends upon an evaluation of the arguments against abortion. And then we have some more positive arguments that appeal to facts about fetuses' minds and the facts that they haven't been conscious yet. They've never been conscious, and so claims that given that they're not persons and they cannot be harmed. Finally, we have an argument that abortion's not wrong because fetuses don't have a right to the woman's body. So this argument will say that even if fetuses are persons, even if they have a right to life, they don't have a right to the woman's body. And since they don't have that right, abortion can be not wrong. So I'm going to present most of these arguments in a somewhat neutral way. If you want more of a critical evaluation of these arguments, you could take a look at the evaluations in this book here, which is freely available at abortionarguments.com. Okay, so our first argument is that fetuses are human beings, and so abortion is prima facie wrong. You recall that to say that abortion is prima facie wrong is basically to say it's wrong in most circumstances, or wrong unless there's a real good reason to do it. This would contrast to it being absolutely wrong. So this says it's because fetuses are human beings that abortion is usually wrong. So we have the argument on the left, fetuses are human beings. If something is a human being, then it's prima facie wrong to kill. Therefore, abortion is prima facie wrong. About the first premise, some people deny this, but we should ask our question, well, what do you mean by human being? Because at least on one idea, what human beings are, it does seem that fetuses are human beings. I mean, they're beings. What else would they be? And they're biologically human, which makes it sound like they are human beings. So that seems true. People might mean something different by human being, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The second premise, though, seems to be where the real action is here. If something is a human being, then it's prima facie wrong to kill. Now, it is true that many human beings are wrong to kill, but the question is, like, why is that? And is it true that just because something's a human being, that makes it prima facie wrong to kill? So we could ask, why is it wrong to kill human beings? Some people might respond, well, it's just because they're human beings. Many people find that explanation to be not satisfying. Like, we need some other reason. Yeah, we know we're human beings, but why are human beings wrong to kill? So basically, we have this question, why are human beings wrong to kill? We try to identify what it is about human beings that makes them wrong to kill. And then there's the question, well, do fetuses have what makes human beings wrong to kill? And we'll get to some of these ideas soon enough. Our next argument says that fetuses are persons, and so abortion is prima facie wrong. It might be that when people say that fetuses aren't persons, aren't human beings, what they really mean to say is that they're not persons. So we have this argument, fetuses are persons. If something is a person, then it's prima facie wrong to kill that being. So therefore, abortion is prima facie wrong. Well, about the second premise, this seems to be a plausible idea. If you are a person, that does seem to give a good reason, or that if something's a person, then it seems like it would be wrong to kill that type of being. The first premise, though, is what's really controversial. You know, of course, some people say that fetuses are persons. Other people say they're not. So how do we try to figure that out? And Marianne Warren is a philosopher who's written about a lot about these sorts of topics. So people sometimes just offer up definitions of persons or say, here's what I think persons are, and leave it at that. But I think we can probably kind of do better than that. So here's a couple questions that are worth thinking about. Will your personhood ever end? Will your body ever not contain a person? You could think about that. Your basic answers are yes or no. Another question, what's the difference between you and some clearly non-persons? Like, what's the difference between you and a rock or a toaster or a carrot? And then over I have some pictures of personified beings. If a being is personified, then it's made like a person. So what do these beings in these pictures have that makes them like persons? So you can think about these questions, and basically, if you think your personhood will end when you die, or if you were to go into a permanent coma, that would say something about what you think persons are. If you think your personhood will continue after you die, like even after the destruction of your body, that would say something about what you think persons are also. So, based on some activities like this, at least some thinkers conclude that what persons are basically beings with personalities. And to have a personality, you have to be conscious, have feelings, awareness. So the thought is basically to be a person is to be like a minded being, a conscious being with some kind of thoughts, feelings, awareness, so on and so forth. So, so to take this idea of persons back to the argument on the previous page, and I'm having a hard time flipping around on the pages here. The claim that fetuses are persons, that would not quite be true on this idea of what persons are. At the very least, embryos and early fetuses would not be persons because their brains and nervous systems aren't developed enough for consciousness or feeling or awareness. Perhaps far later in pregnancy, fetuses become persons. But at the times when most abortions happen, they would not affect persons on this idea what persons are. So not all arguments against abortion depend upon thinking that fetuses are persons. So one of the most philosophically influential arguments is from a philosopher named Don Marquis, who argues that even though fetuses aren't persons, they have valuable futures. And if something has a valuable future, then it's wrong to kill them, and that would make abortion wrong also. So he gets at this second premise by thinking about why is it wrong to kill us? Why is it wrong to kill you and me? Well, basically because that typically takes away our good futures. And so he argues that fetuses have valuable futures also, and so it's wrong to kill them for the reasons it's wrong to kill us. So two quick doubts here. About the claim that fetuses have valuable futures like ours, that's his exact phrase. Some argue that maybe they really don't. It might be that to have a valuable future like ours, somebody needs to be connected in a psychological way to their future, kind of like we are connected in a psychological way to our future. We're sort of aware of our futures, or at least aware of something, aware of the next moment leading to the next. And so some argue that really to have a valuable future like ours, you need to be a psychological being. And so if fetuses don't yet have minds or consciousness, it wouldn't be literally true that they have valuable futures like ours because they're not psychologically connected to their valuable futures. Next objection to premise two is that some people argue that this premise might make contraception wrong because you might think that, well, there are egg and sperm combinations that could have a valuable future. And if you prevent those egg and sperm combinations from realizing that future, well, it sounds like premise two would make doing that wrong. So some people argue that premise two has implications that contraception is wrong, even contraception by abstinence. So these are two objections to this type of argument. Our final argument, given to think that abortion is prima facie wrong, appeals to the idea that fetuses have a rational human nature. And this is a little different from being a human being. It's a little different, of course, from being just human. And we could get at this idea by like looking at this picture here. At the top, all the beings look very similar, but somebody might say, well, the one on the far right is very different because it has a rational human nature, unlike the other beings. So, and then the claim, of course, is that if something has a rational human nature, then it's prima facie wrong to kill that being. So, this is a pretty abstract sort of argument. And I guess it seems true that you could say that the being on the top right of the picture has a rational human nature. Maybe that seems plausible. But some people argue that premise two is pretty abstract and maybe kind of doubtful. Consider somebody in a permanent coma. Do they have a rational human nature? Um, Either yes or no, but at least many of us think that it could be at least be okay to let somebody die in a coma, permanent coma. And but if they have a rational human nature, then that would be wrong according to the second premise. We could also think about babies born without brains, anencephalic babies. They're missing most of their brains. Um, do they have a human nature? Because again, many people think it would be okay to let them die, even if we can kind of keep them alive a little longer. So there's just questions about this premise. And another more abstract question is how exactly, like exactly why are you supposed to think that premise two is true? Why is it that you have a nature of some kind? Does that get you the characteristics and rights of a thing that actually has that? Is that true? So this would need to be explained. This would need to be discussed more. Okay, this has been a very quick review of some arguments, philosophical arguments for the conclusion that abortion is wrong. And I think I'm going to have to put the arguments on the other side in the next video. So again, as a bit of review, we have the claims that abortion is wrong because fetuses are human beings. And the response to this argument was, yeah, they are human beings, but is it true that if something is a human being, it is prima facie wrong to kill? And that leads us to the question of why exactly are human beings wrong to kill when they're wrong to kill? One answer there is that fetuses are persons. And, well, no, one answer there is that human beings are wrong to kill because they are persons. And we thought through what persons might be. And to think about what persons might be, we had some activities to think about whether our personhood might end, what's the difference between us and non-persons, and I suggested that that might take us to a psychological definition of persons. And on this psychological definition of persons, at the very least, embryos and early fetuses would not be considered persons. Now, I should have mentioned a moment ago that this argument depends on the idea that if something is a person, then it's wrong to kill, and that seems to be a plausible premise. But fetuses do not seem to be persons, at least on this idea of persons. Now, there could be different ideas of persons. Perhaps there's better ideas about persons, but we would have to see those ideas and debate their merits. We also talked about an argument that fetuses have valuable futures and presented some critiques of that. And then we talked about an argument that says fetuses have a rational nature or essence and presented some critiques to that argument also. All right, in our final video, we'll look at some arguments that abortions are not wrong, and a lot of this will depend upon previous discussions, so tune in there. And of course, these arguments are probably better examined on paper, so you could, there are many writings on these arguments, and you want to check those out. All right, thank you.